The Zoom meeting is now live streaming on YouTube.
Oh, there we are.
Karen, may we please speak, Karen, the captioner, may we please see some test captions? Thank you.
Tasting. You're going the wrong way.
Time is now 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. The board members are participating via Zoom and in the boardroom. I'd like to welcome those who are participating via Zoom and those watching the board meeting via live streaming. The link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. If the board is on break or in a closed session, the screen will fade to black and the sound will be muted. In the event there is disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. Mr. David Vickers, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Mr. Eloy Hidon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon. Mr. Stephen Otero, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. Mr. Frank Otero, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. Mr. Romero, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Maximus, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Maximus? I can see him talking, but I can't hear him, so we'll work on getting his audio here, please. Is that you, Maximus?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. That brings us to the announcement of meetings. It is with great pleasure that I state, Dr. Romero, would you please announce the meeting?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. This meeting has been announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Resolution and is legally constituted meeting of the Las Lunas School Board of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Joining us tonight is Maximus Paceno, a junior at Century High School. He has attended Las Lunas schools throughout his entire education. His parents are Chris and Cassandra Johnson. Maximus has made all-state band for 2 years in bass clarinet, and he has been a member of the golf team at Valencia High School for 2 years. Maximus plans to apply to both the Air Force Academy and Naval Academy. Knowing how competitive such colleges are, his plan B is to attend either UNM or Tech and take Air Force ROTC in his quest to become a military pilot. He plans to major in engineering. We are honored to have Maximus here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Maximus.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, individual, with liberty and justice for all. Uno, veridad. Oh. You want me to do it in Spanish as well?
Yes, sir.
Uno, veridad amanadera que los Estados Unidos de América, que república que representa una nación bajo Dios indivisible con unidad de justicia para todos.
Thank you, sir. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Maximus. And based on your bio, seems like you got your life planned out, and we wish you all the very best. We thank you for being a part of our Las Lunas Schools community and taking time to spend the evening with us here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That will bring us to item number 4. Dr. Romero, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. President, I recommend the agenda be approved as noted.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. I'll stand for a motion on the agenda. I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to approve the agenda as presented by Dr. Romero and his staff. I'll stand for a second.
I'll second it.
I have a second by Mr. Elohidon. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That will bring us to item number 5, approval of the consent items. I'll stand for a motion regarding the consent items.
Mr. President, at this time, I move to approve our consent items.
I have a motion by Mr. Elohidon to approve the consent items. I will stand for a second. I have a second by Mr. Stephen Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Elohidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. For the benefit of the audience, all agenda items have been reviewed by the board members individually. Consent items are the action items on the agenda presented by the superintendent and staff for approval. If no discussion has been asked regarding these items by any of the board members, the items may be submitted for approval with one motion and one vote. Brings us to item number 7, Superintendent's Report. Before I turn this over to Dr. Romero, I would like to take an opportunity to thank Mr. Walter Gibson, who came out of retirement to guide our district during this very trying time that we've been through. And I ask the board members if they have anything to say.
Mr. President,
Mr. Vickers.
I just want to say I do appreciate Mr. Gibson's leadership through this time. He did a heroic amount of work and rallied the staff and gave us great progress in an area that none of us had ever had to deal with before. So I really appreciate all the work he did.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers.
Mr. President, members of the board, I couldn't echo what board member Vickers had to say, but I remember, I'm going to say it was going to be in the middle of the summer, we received an email from Mr. Gibson, and he outlined the different things that he had accomplished, hurricanes, earthquakes, different things back east. But I don't think none of us are ready for 2020, and we got through it, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Gibson, for your help in that.
Thank you, Mr. Hito.
Mr. President.
Mr. Frank Otero.
This is Frank Otero. I too want to echo my my thanks. Walt and I worked together. It's the second time we've worked together over a decade. But I too appreciate what he did and coming in and taking care of business and filling in for things. And I wish him luck in his continued retirement again. So thank you, Walt.
Thank you, Mr. Frank Otero.
So, Mr. Smith and board members, I thank you all for your kind words. It has been an honor and a pleasure. I enjoyed being back in Los Lunas. I'm going to enjoy being re-retired. As Mr. Otero indicated, I am, for the first time in a board meeting, actually sitting in my office at home, and I will enjoy that. So thank you all for your kind words. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Thank you, board members. I will turn this over to Dr. Romero now.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Before I start, I wanted to just take a minute to thank Mr. Gibson for the wonderful leadership he's had over the last few months, leading this district through this pandemic. Again, it's never happened before in any of our careers. During this transition, he's been wonderful. He's been showing me around, introducing me to people, and really letting me know what I need to know to be able to take the reins from him. So, Mr. Gibson, thank you for your dedication, your support. And I want to wish you well wishes into your next adventure in life. Thank you for all that you've done for this district and that you'll continue to do for this community. Tonight, I'm going to be giving some updates on what we are doing regarding Los Lunas schools. But before I start, I wanted to also take an opportunity just to kind of introduce myself to everyone. I've been able to be part of the last board meeting, but I've really been able to take the last few days to start to really reunite myself with this community. And so I just wanted to be able to, now that I have many listeners, take the opportunity to just say hello to everyone, really to hello to this entire community. Today I started as the new superintendent for Los Lunas schools. Just really returning to this community as a superintendent is without question an opportunity of a lifetime. But with this pandemic still raging on, it may not seem to be the easiest time to transition into leading a school district. It is, however, a crucial moment for strong, collaborative, and innovative leadership. I grew up in Valencia County, and I've spent nearly my entire life in and around schools. Over the last 25 years, I've held positions at every level, from classroom teacher to district superintendent. I started my career serving some of the most vulnerable and at-risk students in our state. I've been fortunate to teach in many settings, allowing students to find their individual successes unique to each learner. The opportunity to be a teacher has really instilled in me unequivocally to always put students first. I'm coming home to Valencia County and spending the last 4 years as superintendent of Deming Public Schools. Deming's a border town about 200 miles straight south of Los Lunas. When I arrived there, we ranked dead last in the state when it came to student outcomes. As I leave this community for the opportunity in Los Lunas, Deming is now held and recognized across the state as a model for innovative instructional practices. It's going to take time. It's going to take that same kind of focus and innovation to build a new and repave existing pathways for students as we emerge and recover from this COVID crisis. My most pressing priority as your superintendent is leading the efforts to reopen schools for in-person learning safely. That's a lot of what you're going to hear me talk about tonight. School buildings are so much more than just brick and mortar facilities. Kids do better when we can meet their full range of needs, and they deserve our full attention and commitment to get them back into the classroom. I've already started meetings with key stakeholders to ensure that we consider every possible scenario and have the right operational policies in place to reopen for in-person learning when it's safe to do so. But reopening safely is only the first part of our work. Across the country, but more poignantly in smaller, diverse districts like our own, COVID has exposed long overlooked inequalities in education systems. I know that Valencia County's greatest opportunity can be found in its diversity. But to turn an opportunity into a strength, we must work together to meet the needs of all of our students and provide every student with that world-class education. As your superintendent, working closely with the Board of Education, with Los Lunas school staff and parents, I set out to expand opportunities and ensure that we're only investing in the things that work. Together, we will expand our career technical education programs and create pathways for students to pursue for college or career, or both. We'll improve student performances in math and reading at every grade level. And through our work together, we'll increase graduation rates. We have many years of important work ahead of us. From the youngest learners to the adult leaders, to become citizens and leaders of tomorrow. Right now, though, we are leaders of this essential institutions, and our kids and students are watching how we rebuild and recover from COVID, how we support our community and ensure high quality education for tomorrow. The work we do today will determine their futures. It's sacred work, and I'm deeply honored to have the opportunity to do that work back home. I'm looking forward to meeting you, to talking with you, listening to you, and building relationships with every single one of you. Please reach out anytime. Thank you, and I'm honored to be here. At the last meeting, during our special meeting, I had the opportunity to start to outline some of the work that we're going to be doing over the next few days, weeks, and even into months. So if I can we go ahead and start the presentation? Thank you, sir. So tonight, I just wanted to be able to give you all an update from our conversation that we had last. So let's go ahead and go to the second slide. As you know, today began the 2021 legislative session. And I wanted to take some time to be able to share with you some of the legislative priorities that we will be working on in Los Lunas and throughout public education in New Mexico. Our priority is really meeting the New Mexico students via financial solvency. And what that means is we want to make sure that we have put everything in place that we need to make sure that your students are successful. We want to work with our local legislators and our executive branch to make sure that the funding is available and necessary to be able to come back in-person learning and be ready for our students in a safe and secure environment. We also want to assure flexibility for local decision-making to align with each community's educational needs. And really what we mean by that is we want to be able to make the decisions based on what we see as best for students within Los Lunas schools. That may mean our calendar, that may mean after-school opportunities, and that may mean priorities in which we want to ensure we're providing educational instructional outcomes for our students. And the last being tools for recruiting and retaining quality educational personnel. This is important because we want to make sure that we are taking care of our teachers, ensuring that they are safe coming back and they're ready to come back. As we start to get closer to in-person learning, we want to be ready for any needs that we have when it comes to our students and our staff to be able to be ready to come back. We want to make sure that as we are working through this legislative session, that we are addressing needs when it comes to safety, but also when it comes to making sure that we're meeting the needs of staff when it comes to professional development and outcomes when it comes to, of course, raises for our teachers. We want to make sure that they are getting compensated for all the hard work that they are doing. As we go on throughout the next few weeks and into our future board meetings, I want to be able to give you some updates about how the conversations are going. Again, the legislative session started today, and it's a unique one in many ways. One is that it's a 60-day session, but two, it's that we don't have the same in-person ability that we've had in the past. So I'm going to be working very closely with our local legislators and legislators from across the state to make sure that we are helping to let them know and give them information on how to make the best information for our public schools and Los Lunas schools. Next slide, please. I also wanted to give you, again, just an update when it comes to our school safety. As we're getting ready for what's to come in the next few weeks and months within Los Lunas schools, we want to make sure that we're giving you all an update on the safety of our buildings. And so last week, Mr. Baca was able to really talk, last board meeting, Mr. Baca was able to talk about some of those updates and those protocols. And I wanted to share with you just some of the work that we have been working intensively on to get ready for our staff to return and also for students to return in a limited basis. And so some of the things that we have, some detailed plans, really revolve around guidance on wearing masks that you can see us all wearing here tonight in the boardroom. Considerations for schools and how they are able to have the public come in and how we are going to interact together as adults and with students, but also coping with stress. We know that this is going to be a time for, as we come back into the buildings, we want to make sure that we're meeting those social emotional needs of all of our staff and our students. We're also making sure that we have some strict policies and guidance on hand hygiene recommendations, on hand washing, also providing information for bus operators and what they need to know on the bus. We're looking at definitely giving updates and getting the latest information from the Department of Health. Also working with our Department for Resources on COVID-19 and getting the latest information from the executive branch and the DOH. We're also looking at what it means to actually be wearing a mask like this in the classroom and how that's going to affect teaching and learning. And also, of course, working with each individual site on specific needs when it comes to reentry guidance. We're working really hard to make sure, and we do have in stock and in buildings, masks for staff and students when it's time. We've got our face shields ready to go as another precaution. We're working on also making sure that we have a standard and everyone is very clear about what how we disinfect classrooms and making sure that the supplies are available for those classrooms. And of course, I'm going to remind everyone to make sure that we're continuing washing our hands and social distancing, just like we're doing tonight here, right here in the boardroom. So a lot of plans that we're making sure everybody is very clear on. And again, as we go through the next few weeks and months, we'll be continuing to give you updates on how this looks as we are actually rolling this out into facilities and classrooms. Also, board members, as part of your packet tonight, I wanted to make sure that as we get closer, another piece of this is making sure that our air quality in those classrooms is going to be as safe and secure as possible for staff and students. And so in part of your packet tonight, you're seeing a UVC and HEPA portable air filter purifier. We started to order these for some of the classrooms that we are anticipating coming back to in-person learning at the beginning of February. And this is what that looks like. And holding this up for board members. And you can see that it's a portable air purifier system that's able to cycle the air within a certain square footage over a certain amount of time. And this has been recommended to us and actually required of us to be able to have this air purification system by New Mexico PED. Next slide, please. Also want to take the opportunity again to talk about some of the different protocols that we have in place happening right now, even in our virtual setting. These are called the contact tracing protocols, the surveillance testing protocols, and of course, I'm going to give some updates today on our vaccine distributions. So the contact tracing protocols are very specific protocols that we have in place so that we can be able to react and put in place safeguards in case there is any student or staff member that is either test positive for COVID or is in the presence or near someone that has tested positive. This allows us to be able to react very quickly so that we can make decisions on how we are able to clean classrooms, clean facilities, how we are able to make sure that we keep people apart with social distancing, and of course the ever possibility of closing the classroom, closing a wing, or even closing a school or a facility. We've been able to kind of work on those practices and those protocols over the last few weeks and months, and we've gotten very good about how that's going to work out. So we feel very confident with those protocols. The surveillance testing protocols is how we are randomly testing staff members that have contact with students. We are now testing randomly 10% of all staff members that do have contact with students. And our first group were our coaches. Today was the day that we were able to start in-person small group athletic activities and workouts. Today, the feedback that I got is things are going really well. We've got some great feedback from both student athletes and from parents. And we are going to be very diligent in making sure that our contact tracing and our surveillance testing protocols are going to be kept intact so that we continue to have that success. As we get closer to the month of February, we have possibly some opportunities to have some more in-person learning. And that's actually going to be discussed as part of our first action item. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the vaccine distribution. And I really want to thank some people within our community. Thank you to our Valencia County Fire, to our Office of Emergency Management, and to so many healthcare professionals across our community. And specifically, I want to just give a special shout out to our nurses within our community for setting up multiple vaccine distributions that are really a part of our 1A and 1B vaccine distribution set up by Department of Health. But we are starting to become part of that vaccine distribution. We've had a number of staff members already start to become vaccinated through their first vaccine cycle. It's the Pfizer vaccine. And so as the weeks go on, the days go on, we're going to start to be able to vaccinate more and more staff members. I really want to make sure that I give a personal shout out to Nurse Jackie. She has been amazing to be able to support this whole system from what we do at the school sites when it comes to the contact tracing and surveillance testing, making sure that protocols are set up in departments and schools, and also working very closely with the Office of Emergency Management and those providing the vaccine distributions. Nurse Jackie has been that glue that's held all of this together. So when you see Nurse Jackie, make sure you give her a high five, some knuckles. She's been amazing. We couldn't have done this without her. So thank you, Nurse Jackie. Next slide, please. So I wanted to review this potential rollout of what it's going to continue to look like through January, into February, and even into the future. So today is January 19th, and we were able to start that small group athletic opportunities for our student athletes in 5-to-1 pods. Again, we had some great feedback about how that rolled out today. And I know coaches were very excited, parents were very excited, and of course our student athletes were very excited. I want to be very clear that this is a very controlled environment where we have 5 students for every 1 adult, and then within that they're in pods. So those pods do not interact with each other, and that's really that's part of our contact tracing protocol to make sure that those students and those coaches are going to remain in a safe environment. As we move into the future, next week we're looking at really starting those in-person testing for special services. This is really going to allow some of our ancillary staff, our diagnosticians specifically, to be able to start that in-person testing with many of our students that are going to need to go through that diagnostic process. So this is going to be something that's needed to be able to get those students the supports that they need for their educational positive outcomes. If everything goes well, and this is part of that action item that we're going to discuss in just a bit, we're looking forward, and everything seems like it's on par to be able to start in-person learning for some very specific groups of students. These are really our community enhanced learning in classrooms at just four sites that we're looking at right now. We're looking at about 25 students altogether that start this out. We've got some wonderful feedback from the principals. I've been able to talk to them. Those teachers are excited about it, and parents are also very excited about it. These are specific students that really need that in-person learning for multiple reasons. And this is really one of the only environments that's going to allow for them, it's really in person, to be able to continue to support their specific needs. It's very difficult, or in some cases impossible, to be able to provide them learning opportunities through a virtual environment. So we're going to be very specific about working with these students first, and making sure that those environments are going to be kept very strictly off limits to others, making sure that we're following those protocols and ensuring those students are going to be safe, and also those staff members are going to be safe. We're also looking at the possibility, and from what we know today, of our NMAA schedule actually starting on February 1st. And that was the reason we wanted to be able to start to allow some of those athletic practices in small pods starting today, so they had some time to get ready for their seasons. If everything goes well, and we continue to have good numbers in our community across the state, our contact tracing protocols are set, our surveillance testing protocols are continuing to move forward. We should be able to start with some of those NMAA scheduled seasons starting February 1st. And this kind of brings us to what happens next. This is only where we start, and this is really going to take the support and work of the entire community for us to continue to move forward. Right now, there are some, we only can do so much based on Department of Health guidance and requirements. So right now, we only have the opportunity to be able to bring back our athletes in these 5-to-1 pods. We only have the opportunity to bring back students with IEPs, special education students, K-12, in small 5-to-1 pods. And we do right now have the ability to be able to bring back K-5 in 5-to-1 pods. What we don't have is the ability currently today, as I'm speaking, to be able to do any of that when it comes to our secondary students. Now, we've been working closely with New Mexico Public Education Department, and working also with the governor's office and the executive branch. And if things continue to move in a positive direction when it comes to positivity cases, but also as we start to see the vaccine schedule expand across the state, we're really looking forward to possibly adding the possibility of having those students in secondary settings come back in a limited setting. But as you can see, what we're being very specific and intentional about is we are scaling this up over time. We want to make sure that we do this at the right pace and at the right scale so that we ensure the safety of our students and our staff. So again, as we start to see some additional possibilities, I'll be giving the board updates on how that's going to go. But to summarize, today we started with athletes in 5-to-1 pods. If everything is looking good when it comes to our data, we're looking at bringing back our community enhanced learning classrooms on February 1st. We're looking at starting the NMA sports schedules on February 1st. And then as the weeks roll on, we can start to look at bringing small 5-to-1 pods for our K-5 students. And hopefully we'll start to get the possibility and the allowances from Department of Health and PED to start to look at some possibilities for our secondary students. Those are specifically our middle and high school students. And the reason that's so important is we want to make sure that those students are on, especially our high school students, are on a track to be able to continue to get their credits and on their pathways to be able to graduate on time. So those are going to be important. These are just going to be tools that we have in our tool belt to be able to support individual needs of our families and our students. Next slide, please. The last thing I wanted to talk about is I wanted to thank this Board of Education. I got to talk about Mr. Gibson earlier and his support as I've been able to start this adventure with you all as the superintendent of Los Lunas Schools. But I also want to take a moment to thank every one of you as board members. You all have been very supportive. I want to thank each one of you specifically for that support and allowing me to come in, learn the district. It's going to take a little bit of time. I've been having so many conversations with people about the district, but just allowing me and supporting me to have that time to be able to do that and supporting the direction in which this district is going. I wanted to talk about how we as a Board of Education, as a superintendent, have a really unique opportunity here to really look at how our school system is going to move into the future, the more immediate future. And we're going to see a lot of change over this semester. We're going to be moving from virtual learning and keeping our fingers crossed into a hybrid environment as we move into the summer, for summer school opportunities, and how we're able to do credit recovery and be able to look at some of the needs that maybe students have lost over this last year and addressing that over the summer, and then moving into our next school year. And I think a lot of us think about what school is going to be like when we get into next school year. And we kind of think about getting back to normal. But the reality may be that it may never go back to what we thought it was before. We have learned some things over this time in virtual learning that we want to take advantage of. We also see so many students excelling in this environment. We want to be able to keep those things in place to allow those students to continue to excel. We see the opportunities, and just like we're doing right now, to be able to use technology to really enhance learning. And this has really been a powerful way to be able to do that. You see teachers learning tricks of the trade that they never actually, have done on this scale before when it comes to Canvas and actually having all of their lessons online. So these are things that we're going to see that's going to affect us forever. And these are good things that we want that have come out of what we've learned over the last year. So to do that, we have talked about, as a school board and myself as a superintendent, of having really a school board retreat. This is going to allow us to be able to set the goals, the values of this school district moving forward from really this virtual environment, from this pandemic, and as we see the light at the end of the tunnel, how we're going to move into the future based on everything that we've learned. It's going to be a perfect time to be able to relook at where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going to go. So really reviewing the virtual learning model and how that can impact learning in the future, reviewing what that hybrid model is going to look like as we start to transition throughout the semester and getting into next year. And then again, setting those goals and priorities for the remainder of the 2021 school year. We've got a tentative date set right now of February 20th. Again, it's tentative. We're starting to put together some ideas about what that's going to look like. But I'm excited to be able to do that with you. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity. So with that, Mr. President, members of the board, I will stop there and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Board members? Mr. Stephen Otero.
The question I have for Dr. Romero on this HEPA filter piece of equipment, what is the intentions, and have you made a decision to use these in our classrooms, or are they going to be used in the front entries of the schools' offices? And how many of these units will be used throughout the district? And are we using the CARES fund funding for this?
Good. Excellent question. Thank you, Mr. Otero. So yes, these are portable air filter units that will be for classroom use. When we look at some of the spaces, so as part of the specs to this, they're good for a certain square footage, which will be within the parameters of a classroom, a typical classroom within Los Lunas schools. There are some larger units that are available for when it comes to like libraries, or when it comes to large office or conference room spaces. As we have been able to start to be able to order these for the classrooms that we see coming in the near future, but these are going to be devices that we're going to have in every one of our classrooms as students start to roll in more and more and more. This is going to be dictated to us by the Public Education Department as part of a checklist that they have, and part of that is the air quality and the HVAC system. So every school does have an HVAC system for heating and cooling, and with that there is a filter system within that. But you're going to see a variety of those type of HVAC systems across the state and within our own schools about the efficiency and how they and the type of filter that they have. So the bar that's been set by PET is that we have to have something called a MERV 13 filter. That's a high-end filter that's going to really be able to take out many of the very fine particles within the air that we would have in a classroom. Our systems aren't designed for the MERV 13 filters, so this is another option, and this was actually given to us by different options by PED that we see as a viable option to be able to do that. Ms. Hermans, I don't know if you can off the top of your head know how many devices we'll need across the district, and if you could help answer the question about, and I believe it's going to come from our CARES funding, but you can verify that for me.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Romero and Mr. President, members of the board. We received $239,000 roughly from the CARES/GEARS funding, specifically to be able to buy these air quality air purifiers. That will probably not be able to put one in every single classroom. So then, yes, we would look for the CARES funding to pick up the rest of the cost and/or 2 mil. Right now, we would need roughly 600 to be able to have one in every single classroom. This first round, like Dr. Romero spoke about, we've ordered enough to place in the classrooms that we plan to have students in here real soon. And we're waiting for the state to complete an RFP for the filters and the purifiers, and then we'll probably utilize their RFP in order to purchase the remainder of the filters that we need.
Thank you, Mr. Hermans.
So a follow-up question. Now that we have our secretaries on the front lines of our schools, will any be used for their area for the secretaries that are currently working right now?
I think that's a great comment. I know we've talked about making sure that our office staff are going to be safe and secure. I think that's probably something that we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Board members?
Mr. President, I just want to say I'm very encouraged and by Dr. Romero's willingness to press forward as much as possible with this in-person learning, and he's done a whole bunch just barely getting here. But I think this is really good from the parents I've talked to and teachers that I know. They are ready to get back to seeing students in person. I also know a few athletes, and same with them. And so I'm very encouraged with Dr. Romero's energy and willingness to press on with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero, thank you for that presentation. There's a couple of things that I wrote them down here. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's some that I really like and I'm encouraged. And you don't have to answer none of this, but one of them, you mentioned calendars and maybe extra hours and going towards the summer. So I want that to be on everybody's radar. I really feel good about that. One other thing you said is our children are going to be looking at us and how we handle this and how we go forward. Also, our community is going to be looking at us also how we handle this. And these masks and the way we're handling ourselves is the template that we're going to go forward with. I know this is your first official or yet second official day. Yesterday was the holiday. How are we doing on the CARES Act? We know we're going to be hitting obstacles in front of us, these HEPA filters, those other air purifiers. I still want to see plexiglass barriers for those secretaries, some of our common area just to separate that. So if you could get to us maybe next meeting with an update on the CARES Act where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Idon. Absolutely, we've been trying to be very diligent about how we are spending those care funds, and so many of the funds have been spent on PPE. That's the masks, that's the shields, cleaning equipment, and we also have some of the costs when it comes to transportation. And then you're seeing this large cost that we want to be able to do to make sure our HVAC systems are up to par. Some of the other work that we'll be doing is actually working with the legislative during the legislative session. As you know, they kind of scooped in and took part of that care fund, and so part of the budgets actually from the executive branch, from LESC and LFC, all are showing for us to be able to get those funds back. So that's a good thing. We're excited about that. And then the other part that we have coming in is, so we've got the care funds. We've got a new set of federal funds coming in. These are what we're calling the CARISA funds. It's going to have the same requirements to be able to make those expenditures. The good part about this is we're looking at, it's probably going to be about 4 times as much in funding as we had in the care funds. So that's an exciting thing to make sure that we can do everything that we need to be able to make sure that our offices are safe, classrooms are safe, our playgrounds are safe. But yes, sir, Mr. Idon, we'll continue to give updates about how that's spent. We were actually just talking today about what we have left in CARES funding to really support the purchase of these air purification devices, and also to be able to look at hotspots for students across our community, which we're going to start seeing going out to families now. So we're excited about that. But yes, we will continue to give you updates, Mr. Idon.
Mr. President, members of the board, one last question, Dr. Romero. I'm going to say it was last June or July's timeframe, and it was reported to us that we unloaded a couple pallets of PPE. In our checks that we approved this week, I noticed some masks in there also. Can you get an update where we're at with our PPE? Are we okay with the hand sanitizer?
Yes.
Gloves, are we heavy on one and thin on the other?
So what I can tell you right now, and I can definitely get you exact numbers of our, what the inventory is. But what I'm very confident in is that we do have masks for adults. We've got masks for visitors. We've got masks for students. We've got hand sanitizer. We have got the gowns. We've got shields. We've got all the pieces in place to be able to have students come back. If we were to have all of our students come back tomorrow, we would be able to do that. And this has really been preparation over the last few months. Now that the inventory that we have would run out, but we have been talking about how we're going to keep that inventory resupplied to make sure that we continue to have it available for as long as we need it. But yes, I can give you some specific numbers on how that is. And from what I've been, what's been reported to me is we have an adequate supply to be able to do that if we had everybody come back tomorrow.
No more questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hito.
Mr. President,
Mr. Vickers?
Mr. Haron brought up an interesting thing that I had forgotten to mention, and that is a calendar. I've had some parents approach me wanting to know when graduation is so they can plan their vacations, so they can invite out-of-town family members. And so that's a really key thing. Do we have any dates for graduation?
Mr. President, Mr. Vickers, that is a perfectly timed question, in that we were having some of these conversations today. So let me give you the bad news first, is that we don't have some of those dates set. There's a couple of things. We're looking at graduation. We're also looking at calendar for next year. These are important things that we need to have families know now so they can plan this. These are things that we actually have to have our schools know now so they can start getting ready for next year. When we start to get into the spring semester, we're actually planning for next year. And so we know that this is part of the conversation that we had just today, is that we're behind the curve on this. And we know that we need to get those dates set. We need to be able to get that calendar set for next year. We need to be able to work with the community to start to design the calendar for next year, have time to be able to bring it to the board. The problem is that we don't have all the, we don't know everything that we need to know to be able to answer that question exactly. And so We've been having conversations with other districts also about what that's going to look like, also with Public Education Department and DOH. And the guidance that we've been given so far when it comes to graduation is that we have to follow Department of Health guidelines at the time. It's difficult to know what those are going to be like, but what I can tell you is that this is going to be a top priority of mine, is to be able to get that graduation at least tentatively planned, so we have dates and we do have a plan for how that's going to look when it comes to, what is it going to be in person? Is it going to be a traditional graduation? We want to have those ready to go, and we also want to be able to get through the conversation to be able to get that calendar set so we can present that to you. So that's something we have to do, and we're already behind. I already know that we're behind the timeline on that. So that's going to be something we have to do quickly. But I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you very much. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. So I have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to reiterate that there were a lot of questions from community members and staff members about how we were moving forward. And I want to assure you that the steps that we took after the break were definitely decided based on what we were doing before the break and in accordance with the guidelines in the DOH health orders. And I want to assure our school community, that's the staff, our community, students, that we took the biggest step that we possibly could. And I am very encouraged with our discussions on our progress forward. I'm sure that we will continue to move and improve our protocols. We will continue to improve our safety measures, and we're going to make this transition as safe as we possibly can. And I know that it's coming slow to some and it's coming quick to some, but we're all in this together. And I can assure you that we're going to do the very best that we can, and we're going to take all of those steps to reopen our schools. And I'm very proud of the decisions that the board has made and that the staff has made in our transition into moving forward. So it's very, very encouraging. Any more discussion, board members? If there's no more discussion, that will bring us to item number 8, discussion and action as needed regarding the district learning plan. I believe you've discussed this in detail, Dr. Romero. If you have anything to add, you're more than welcome to do that. But at this time, I'm going to ask for a recommendation based on our current guidelines, the Department of Health orders, and our current county's status, recommendation for our continued district learning plan.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Just based on everything that we just discussed, I would like to move forward with some very specific opportunities for in-person learning. But knowing that the majority of the district is going to still continue to remain in a virtual setting, I do recommend that the board approve that the district move forward with a virtual learning environment with limited in-person learning opportunities based on student needs and, of course, allowances from New Mexico PED and the New Mexico Department of Health. Again, those limited opportunities that I can see in the very foreseeable future are going to be opportunities for in-person diagnostic testing and to be able to work with some of our very neediest students that have IEPs. So as we move forward into the month of February, into the month of March, we could see possibly some opportunities when it comes to K-5 small pods, and maybe with the allowances from Department of Health and PED, some opportunities for our secondary students to have some of those same 5-to-1 pods. But again, I will continue to give you as a board updates on how that is moving forward. So again, let me read the recommendation one more time, and we can kind of talk about the language. That I recommend that the board approve the district to move forward with a virtual learning environment with limited in-person learning opportunities based on student need and allowances from New Mexico PED and New Mexico DOH.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. I'll stand for a motion on item number 8.
Mr. President, this time I move to go with that recommendation of Dr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I have a motion by Mr. Hidon to approve the recommendation as presented by Dr. Romero. I'll stand for a second.
Mr. President, I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I have a second by Mr. Vickers. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
I've got one question before I cast my vote of
Yes, sir.
Dr. Romero for discussion. Dr. Romero, have the special ed needs kids' parents been personally contacted to let them know how we're moving forward with this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Otero. Yes, they have been contacted. All the students that we're looking at in those classrooms have been contacted. There are a few that are making the choice right now to not do that at this time. We're completely respecting their decision. We want to make sure that they feel it's safe before they have their students come back, their children come back. But we've had an overwhelming success with having students and parents responding very positively to this. So yes, they have all been contacted. We've been able to talk to them about what the day is going to look like, what the schedule is going to look like, what transportation is going to look like, how we're going to be able to food services, playground, all those things. So yes, been in contact with those parents and actually gotten some wonderful feedback from those parents about how to proceed moving forward.
Thank you. I vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. Mr. Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That will bring us to item number 12, announcements of meetings. As allowed by the Open Meeting Act and District Open Meetings Resolution, on occasion, a quorum of board members attend the same function, including those held at school sites, at the district level, as well as sports functions, conferences, workshops, and trainings. Board members will refrain from discussing and/or acting on board issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if other meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. I would like to announce the following meetings. On February 10th through the 13th, there will be the New Mexico School Board Association Virtual Board Institute held via Zoom. A quorum will be in attendance. On February 16th, there will be a Finance Committee meeting at 4 p.m. And on February 23rd, there will be a regular board meeting at 6 p.m. in the boardroom. The meeting locations are dependent on mandates from the governor if need be, and they will be held via Zoom. That brings us to
Mr. President,
Mr. Vickers.
did you mention the February 9th meeting? Or is that no longer valid?
Correct. Good catch, Mr. Vickers. There will be no meeting on February 9th due to other scheduled events. There will only be one regular meeting in February, that being the 23rd. I apologize. I should have read that first. That
Mr.
brings us-
President, was the approval of the annual prevention maintenance plan removed?
No, that was on the consent sheet.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So that brings us to adjournment. But before I go to adjournment, I want to thank everyone for making this meeting possible. We have some people sitting in the boardroom that are behind the scenes here that deserve a lot of credit for making this happen. We put this meeting together so we could try to make this happen and get back into the boardroom. They did an outstanding job. I have no doubt that we're going to continue to improve. So I want to thank you guys very much for what you did. Ms. Wolf as well. Thank everybody for attending the way that we did. I think we pulled it off very, very well. That being said, I'll stand for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero, by Mr. Eloy Hidon. I'll stand for a second.
I'll second that motion.
I have a second by Mr. Vickers. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The meeting is adjourned at 6:55. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.